Hey, everybody.
What's going on, everybody? I'm here with Marco. My name is Philip Hartshorn. I'm a filmmaker. You may have seen some of my film work from China. I have a popular couple of documentaries on YouTube, living at the Shaolin Temple. I've also done a lot of action film work, and I love video games, just like Marco.
And I'm an opera singer. I'm a former professional opera singer turned voice actor. I love talking about analyzing and discussing video game music from an emotional perspective. And today we are teaming up, and we're going to be taking a look at the Wrath of the Lich King cinematic, stopping and starting as we go, getting an insight both from the music and from the video.
This is a very popular video in the Warcraft community.
My son.
I love how the music starts right away, even as the logo passes, and you get that real ominous. And we both know the story of Arthas, so like I think this does such a great job of like showcasing right away musically how deep the whole Arthas has gone, you know?
Absolutely. And you hear that sound, like this music, it's very icy. It's very cold, right? It has this kind of rising feeling. And then the first image we get on the screen is just this frozen throne, literally. And it's literally icy. It's blue colors, these very cold tones.
Even though it's icy, there's also like a warmth in the way that I think it's the strings and the horn, boo, 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 right? And that's that invincible sort of, O Kanani Thanagor and all that other stuff. It's very cool.
The day you were born, the very forests of Lordaeron whispered the name Arthas.
So good. And when I first saw this, I knew absolutely nothing about the story.
Yeah.
And this video, they convey so much with the visuals and the narration. Like just the way he pauses, Arthas. It's like, that's clearly Arthas, this guy. And it's like, what happened to this guy? There's such an immediately tragic undertone.
But also the swell in the music and how, like, as we get closer and closer into Arthas's eyes, and obviously they turn bright blue, he awakens from the ice and stuff. Like, even the swell that we have musically, it makes us abundantly aware of his presence, right? It's such an interesting mood setting as well. It's cool. And then the single soprano that comes in here.
Fantastic. Awesome. So what I like about this video is a lot of the most popular videos, these big epic set pieces and action pieces and everything. It's a very intimate video. He's the only person on screen. It has so many questions. And I love how it takes its time with this long pause, and then his footstep just lands down. And it's just like, what is going on here? Such a tragedy.
I think you're right. And I also think it's interesting how, like, we have that single boy soprano, long live the king, forever may he reign, right? And it's just that one single shot of him just like sort of emerging after all of the stuff that he experienced in his life to now be at this position to being the true essence of the Lich King. And like the single boy represents Arthas's, I don't know, innocence, youth, like possibility that was failed. There's so many different like sort of subtextual things that we can think about.
There's a shot coming up where I have a lot to say about what you just touched on. Yeah.
Perfect.
So, there's a couple times when he pauses throughout this. There's another one later, which I think is everybody's favorite part. And it's like, there's something going on here. And it's almost like he's being pulled by the power of the helmet, by the power of the Lich King. And you can see like there is someone in there, almost like in a Darth Vader way. There's a very loneliness feeling to this trailer. It's very alone. There's nobody in this massive landscape. And they choose to show it a couple times. Huge shots where there's nothing but this person who's completely alone. And what is the narration talking about? It's his father saying, oh, when you were born, it's so great, you're fantastic. And it's like, his father's not here. Nobody's here. It's almost like him reliving what he could have been, thinking back to how his father described them and stuff. And it's just, beautiful.
But also like so tragic. All of Arthas's actions lead him to being isolated and alone. And it's interesting how when we look at the cinematic and we look at how expansive and we look at how we only have a single soprano singer here, all that stuff caters itself to everything has led him to this. And all he has is an undead army. Yeah. The horns are so beautiful.
Child.
And for me, what I like about that is when he wipes the snow away. This is when it hit me it's a child's voice singing, and it's just so sad. There's a feeling for me of this nostalgia of going home and like wiping the dust off of your old belongings or something, right? And it's just like, what is this? Almost like, you know, he's revisiting himself for a second. He's thinking back. And I think the voice, like you said, the choice was so on point for that. To see this like very severe looking character, again, knowing nothing about him, to have this tender voice singing. You know, it's like, what is going on? The contrast is so stark. It's such a tender movement. Let's just wipe a little dust off. You know, he looks like such a brutal, strong guy. And like you said, look at what he did to his father. Ruthless actions were taken. And it's just like these little intimate moments with this character voice so much to us, only with the visuals. And even the lensing, if you want to get into the technicality of the film, for a lot of this, they've used like a 50 millimeter lens. It's a bit closer to a portraiture lens, as opposed to, you know, this big sweeping shots in a lot of the other Warcraft videos. This one is all about character.
It's so interesting too that, you know, we're talking about him and his size, and I think when we actually see him, we do get those horns that come in, ba, 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 right? That big sort of. So even though we have that boy finishing, that's when we replace the boy with that brass, which I think showcases him as he sort of stands up from that very intimate moment of wiping the ice. And we know that he's wiping the ice because Invincible's there, right? If I remember correctly.
I believe so, yeah.
And so that's another interesting idea where it's like he's wiping the ice of probably his only companion, his only friend that he literally, you know, we understand that his relationship with Invincible is so beyond that love of like person and animal. It's like, it's almost like soul connection at that point, right?
I watched with pride as you grew into a weapon
That horn.
of righteousness.
Frosting.
Chills, man. Every time I see that. And when I first saw it, I just watched War Within, and I say,
oh,
that's
the same
that
movement
Anduin does.
Yeah.
That's the pose. And the fact that they did a callback to this with Anduin, this pained expression is unbelievable. I love that referential kind of layers of cinematic history. And this is many years ago. But what I also love about it is there's that moment where he kind of wilts, as his father was saying, you know, a weapon of righteousness. And it's like he almost is like, I didn't do that. What have I done? And then it's almost like, nope, the Lich King takes control again. Boom. And it's this kind of haughty position with the sword.
Poised.
Very specific. Yeah, kind of poised for battle. And again, this beautiful, beautiful lensing here. And the sword is just filling the frame in a way that's very threatening. If you notice, there's a shallow depth of field, probably like a 1.4 f-stop. Very, very juicy bokeh in the background with the snowflakes. But what we have is this out of focus sword tip near us because it's more of a portraiture lens. It's very threatening. It feels like it's in our face, you know? And it's just like this kind of, like you said, the boy's voice, now that tender voice goes away, and now it becomes this powerful, ruthless tone. And it's just like everything coming together in that shot, man.
Yeah.
Unbelievable.
Remember, our line has always ruled with wisdom and strength. And I know you will show restraint when exercising your great.
Isn't it cool how at the music there we start to feel this like real like build up? It's sort of like it almost like it wants to burst out of its shell, and we see that as the sword starts to warm up, if you will, with that sort of energy, whatever it is. There we have this. It's all within like the structure of the like the musical language that we've heard, but there's a little bit of anticipatoriness because we're about to like breach, and, you know, we know that sword is going to plunge into the ice and awaken everything, but for a first time viewer, you don't necessarily see that. So there's this real like build up of like what's coming, you know?
What's he doing? Yeah. This is what I want to talk to you about. Some of the cool things that happen with filmmaking where you have like everybody working together and kind of synergy is the sound design of the sword is this kind of cracking ice type sound, you know, and it becomes part of the music. And that's what's so awesome when like you have a really good kind of team on point who's like probably in whatever order it happened. Okay, let's compose the music to the scene, or did you get the music first and then cut to it, which can happen as well. They're using the sound design to add to that buildup that you just talked about in this kind of anticipatory, what's cracking, what's coming. We don't know what he's going to do. Why is he holding the sword out? He's just standing alone on this cliff. It has this very tension building feel to it. In a lot of tension builders you hear in sound design, it's kind of, it's really just like,
you just turning the dial.
Exactly. So it's kind of like, what is going on? What's happening? It's awesome when sound design kind of morphs perfectly with music. good. I mean, it's just what I talked about, right? When he slams that thing down, the sound design with the music hitting, it's just like so perfect, right?
It's also so interesting to me because as this section starts up, you get the ha ha ra da 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 da, and then you get like the chorus that is essentially representing all of these sort of folks coming alive. It's so cool, the juxtaposition between a young boy Arthas singing in the distance, reflecting on his life, and then ha. Same sad melody, same like plaintive sort of descending melody, but thrust forward with this male dominant chorus that's so satisfying to listen to.
And I'm actually curious your thoughts on this, kind of like the way that an orchestra is recorded in this case, and it could just be the reverb, but like the way the child sounded, it felt far away. It felt really kind of distant, like, that's in the past for him.
Yeah.
And then this kind of like very masculine, it feels very close now, and it feels very like imminent, like, oh, there's danger coming, what's cracking in the ice.
They almost blend them together. Isn't that cool? It shifts from like distance to being interwoven, so it's the same musical idea, which is cool.
It's so focused on character, but the character doesn't say anything. The visuals say it.
Yeah.
The narration says it, and that's what's so interesting about this. Like, the more I watch, I'm like, this is an awesome video. But I love how we pulled back now, and we see just the kind of damage and the anticipation of what's coming.
Okay, so it wasn't Invincible. It was the Ice Wraith Dragon, whatever, Wyvern.
So believe it or not, it's actually, I believe it's Sindragosa. I love that now it's like a march, like the kind of male choir you're talking about. And it's as the ice is kind of marching and cracking and everything. And that shot was so iconic. Do you know they actually kind of used that shot in Game of Thrones?
Really?
It's the shot of Arthas on the left side of the frame. It's a really cool composition, and it's a composition that's oftentimes is used in horror films because there's an anticipation. There's in a negative space on the right side of the frame, and what happens, of course, the big reveal, boom, Sindragosa blasts out of the ice, and it's like, oh, all of a sudden the frame is filled up, and it's a really cool effect. And it's also interesting shot because it's typically a hero shot, is what we call it sometimes. You'll see it in like Marvel films and all these cool things where the camera just goes a little bit lower, as you can see, and we're kind of angled up.
Yeah.
And what it does is it makes him very heroic, very imposing. In the same way, the Greek statues, if you've ever been to a museum, they were made to be monumental. They're like 9 feet tall. Like, they're bigger, they're larger than life. They're not like human size. To feel a certain way when you see them, like if you go to St. Peter's in the Vatican, there's like 12-foot tall letters, on the ceiling made out of marble because it's meant to feel so big that you feel small. Now it almost does feel heroic, even though he's this kind of bad guy. He has a purpose for doing this. So it's like, ooh, what's he doing? I'm interested now.
It's an interesting thought too, because we have that in music as well. The idea that like we can deify villains and we can take organs, or even this is fairly like, it's a march, but there is a certain religiosity about it that comes through with the horns and things that, again, it's all like sort of amorphous because there's no like real rules. But when you typically hear like the organ, especially, that's usually for a church. However, in the case of video games, almost always church music or organ music / church music with chorus and things represents villainy. And I find it really interesting that you're getting a hero shot here, but it's also on the flip side, it's like he's the anti-hero, it's not someone that we admire per se.
Iconic. I love how they chose specific shots there to not reveal the whole size and scale of this creature at once. They chose shots that were a little too close. You see its underbelly, you see a wing and everything to kind of show that it would be this big if you were there. And then only as the music kind of builds up to that moment, boom, up on the cliff, right? And you get this amazing shot for the reveal. Finally, like, what is he doing this entire trailer? Oh, there it is.
It is profoundly intense, isn't it, when it ramps up like that? Nice swells and stuff. Yeah, it's cool.
And not even knowing the history, the musical history of Warcraft, when I first saw this, I was just like, oh, this music's good. This is really good.
Yeah. Well, it's fun because it's rooted in like traditional classical writing, but it's very cinematic at the same time. So even though like the classical period of music, yes, it was specific with Baroque and Mozart and so on and so forth, the instrumentation and the way that it sort of presents, you could hear it in a symphony hall and be like, oh, this fits with anything that I would otherwise hear in a symphony hall, which is really cool.
I'm sure you agree. Like, there's a beauty to listening to music without any visuals accompanying it. You know, you can feel the emotions and kind of feel the story of the music without anything. So to use this visuals on this scale and taken, you know, with this much care, like I said, of the lighting, of the lensing, of the coloration, like here we have this beautiful analogous harmonies on the chromatic circle, just these deep blues, a little bit of purple, very familiar colors, but they're presented in a cold and kind of, you know, bereft of any life way. And it's just, everything comes together.
There's some cool points that you're making too about the fact that when we see, what's her name? Sandragosa?
Sindragosa.
But the fact that you can like look down, you're right, that I didn't even understand the size of scale when you're looking down. I mean, I understand it, but like you see the belly, you see the heart, you see like the wings, this like it's interesting.
And it's just nice to see that every choice here was deliberate. You know, nobody was just kind of phoning in a shot and everything. And to me, this just speaks to the power of storyboarding and that these people really know what they're doing and they care what they're doing.
Yeah.
But the truest victory, my son.
Oh,
it's fantastic. I mean, I want to hear what you have to say about that music right there, because that dun, 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 so iconic. Whenever it plays in the cutscenes, I'm like, oh, Lich King.
Especially when we see her spread out her wings and you just see all of a sudden like just the sheer amount of soldiers and stuff, just like, you know, ba, 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 ba. It's just very much very motivated and very like driven in a very disturbed sort of way. You know, it's very almost guttural in some ways.
Absolutely. And I love what you said earlier about the sort of religiosity of it, because this is kind of what this feels like. Everybody's gathered. You got all these soldiers, you know, and they're in a way just kind of like mindless drones, right? But it feels like they're almost at a church, like reverent of this massive creature that's waking up and of Arthas himself and everything. And it's like, whoa, there's a whole story here. And again, you know, for Warcraft fans, they knew what's going on here. They know who Arthas is. For me, watching it out of context, it just raises so many questions that are both answered within the video and then questions that are like, I got to know what's going on here, like in the backstory. And that's what I always say, like with a short film, even like the Genshin character demos, like the shortest, like a minute-long video, I always try to treat them like a short film. It's okay, what questions are being asked? What's being answered? You know, what sort of like resolutions are there within the writing? And a lot of the time they can achieve that in like a minute-long thing. And it's the same thing with this, right? We asked earlier, what is he doing? You know, what's the extent of his tragedy? And it's like, oh no, those people are dead. What happened? Because they said, you know, his dad was saying, oh, you're like this great guy, you're gonna be the best ruler, exercising caution and restraint. That does not look like restraint to me, right? So there's just so much in it, and so he doesn't even speak Arthas. I think it's fantastic.
Your people. I tell you this, for when my days have come to an end, you shall be king.
So cool, man.
So good.
So good. And that's the first kind of almost human shot we get of him. You notice the lighting choice there was to finally show a little bit of his nose, a little bit more of his, it's like, oh, he is, okay, I can see some humanity there. And it almost brings more tragedy to it.
Yeah, it's true. You see his lips and his nose. Yeah. It's funny because you think that the helmet is actually his head for so much of it. And then you zoom in and you're like, oh.
And that's kind of what I thought the first time, like, what is this being, you know? And then is he like a skeleton himself, like the people? And then you see, oh no, he was once a man or still is, it's unclear. But he's very expressionless, and that's almost has more of a sadness to it. Like I said, he seems like he's kind of fighting when he wilts for a second, thinking about what his dad said, and then, no, I got to do what I got to do. And it's just like, what an interesting character.
I think it was a really smart choice to have him be this paladin that sort of fell from grace. I mean, there's no like more iconic sort of falling from, you know, highest of highs to be like a holy, you know, protector, to all of a sudden becoming, and really his whole journey, it's sort of the eternal question, was Arthas right? You know, did Arthas do anything wrong?
Hey, absolutely. And that's what's so cool about these characters. And I think that's why so many people love Arthas, so many people love Sephiroth, even though they're like the big bads. It's the question of like, wait, were they in complete control? Were they? Was he in control of the Lich King or him? Was Genova in control of Sephiroth or Sephiroth in control of Genova? It's like, when did they lose their humanity? Because I know Arthas, like, you know, at one point, like, culls a village. Apparently, he was completely within himself, but someone was like, oh, I think he might have had Frostmourne at that point, or the opposite, or one of the
later. He gets it later. He didn't have it. He made a choice because because he was the first person to ever have to deal with the fact that there was this virus, this plague that they were putting into the bread, into the wheat, and then people were eating it. It's like, what do you do? Do you protect your people from further scourge and from further plague, or do you have to wipe them out? It's a really interesting. And you're right. I mean, just like Sephiroth, not to go on a complete separate unrelated tangent, but he was sort of given a rough deal, and he's like, well, what do I do with this situation? Okay, I guess it's my turn to take over the planet. We don't know all that stuff, and to a degree we don't even need to know it, because the visuals and the music sort of lend that to us to be able to be like, oh, well, yeah, that's exactly what happened.
Like I said, getting down to the storyboarding and everything's deliberate. You're able to convey so much with one shot, right? And they do so much with every shot here. But with characters like those guys, like Arthas and Sephiroth, they're so interesting to talk about and revisit and have these great discussions, because there's a subtlety there. It's not just like, you know, slapped on the screen, very basic stuff. There's a lot to kind of pick apart and digest with what they present, and I think that's why they're great stories.
Well, Philip, this was fun. I'm glad we got to do this, and I feel like we'll be doing more of it.
I feel like I learned a lot from you, so I love doing these, man.
I feel like I learned a lot from you too. If you'd like to see us do more of this together, let us know in the comments.
Yeah, let us know what you want to have us watch
what's next. Yeah. Maybe some Guilty Gear Strive, maybe. We'll see. Anyway, thanks a ton, everybody. We'll see you later.